Hi Year 11, so for scene 2 of Macbeth, I'm going to do the same thing that I did for scene 1, act 1. I will read through it. Again, do pay attention to the side here as you've got some notes that will help you. You've got the overview of the act here as well and the scene, and you've got the original version there as well for you. I'll read through it. I won't make mention the characters unless there's sort of a group of them, as I did with the witches when I was referring to all of them, just to make it a little less confusing. And then I will go through and I'll add annotations that you can then add to your own copy. So if you remember, we had at the very start the witches had gathered and they were deciding when they were going to meet again. They resolved they were going to meet with Macbeth just after a battle, and that they were going to they discussed what weather they wanted to create as well. Okay, so here we are then at the King's headquarters. Alarum within, enter King Duncan, Malcolm, Donalbain, Lennox with attendants, meeting a bleeding captain. So again, as I said, make sure that you refer back to the list of characters so that you can make sense of who these characters are as they are being introduced to us. Duncan is the king, Malcolm and Donalbain are his son, Lennox is a Thane lord. So, what bloody man is that? He can report, as seemeth by his plight, of the revolt the newest state. This is the sergeant who, like a good and hardy soldier, fought gainst my captivity. Hail, brave friend, say to the king the knowledge of the broil as thou didst leavest. Doubtful it stood, as two spent swimmers that do cling together and choke their art, the merciless MacDonald, worthy to be a rebel, for to that the multiplying villainies of nature do swarm upon him, from the western isles of Kerns and Glasses is supplied, and fortune on his damned quarrel smiling showed like a rebel's whore, but all's too weak for brave Macbeth, well he deserves that name, disdaining fortune with his brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution, like valour's minion, carved out his passage, till he faced the slave, which never shook his hands, nor bade farewell to him, till he unseamed him from the nave to the chaps, and fixed his head upon our battlements. O valiant cousin, worthy gentleman, as whence the sun gains his reflection, shipwrecking storms and direful thunders, so from that spring whence comfort seemed to come, discomfort swells. Mark, King of Scotland, mark. No sooner justice had, with valour armed, compelled these skipping kerns to trust their heels, but the Norwegian lord, surveying vantage, with refurbished arms and new supplies of men, began a fresh assault. Dismayed not this our captains, Macbeth and Banquo? Yes, as sparrows eagles, or the hare the lion. If I say sooth, I must report they were, as cannons, overcharged with double cracks, so they doubly redoubled strokes upon the foe. Except they meant to bathe in reeking wounds, or memorize another Golgotha, I cannot tell. But I am faint, my gashes cry for help. So well thy words become as thy wounds, they smack of honour both. Go, get him surgeons. Exit captain, attendant. Enter Ross and Angus, again two lords here. Who comes here? The worthy Thane of Ross. What a haste look through his eyes, so should he look, that seems to speak things strange. God save the king. Whence camest thou, worthy Thane? From Fife, great king, when the Norwegian banners flout the sky and fan our people cold. Norway himself, with terrible numbers, assisted by that most disloyal traitor, the Thane of Cawdor, began a dismal conflict, till that Bellona's bridegroom lapped in proof, confronted him with self-comparisons, point against point, rebellious arm against arm, curbing his lavish spirit, and to conclude, the victory fell on us. Great happiness! That now Sweno, the Norway's king, craves compensation. Nor would we deign him burial of his men, till he disbursed at St. Colm's Inch $10,000 to our general use. No more that Thane of Cawdor shall deceive our bosom interest. Go pronounce his present death, and with his former title greet Macbeth. I'll see it done. What he hath lost, noble Macbeth hath won. Exeunt. Okay, so as I said, I will go through and I'll explain and sort of break down then some of the analysis for this scene so that you can copy these notes down into your own copy of the text. Okay, so even from the beginning here with the stage directions that we've been given, we can identify here this alarum within. You can see on the note there, it's a trumpet call to arms. So this is enough to identify the scene's location. So we can tell that this is going to be near or on the battlefield where the king has sort of stationed himself in some headquarters. And we have at the very opening here, we know then that it must be towards the battlefield because we have Duncan asking this interrogative, what bloody man is this? So he can see that this man who obviously has wounds, he's been injured, he's asking who this man is. He can report, as seemeth by his plight of the revolt, the newest state. Okay, so his condition, obviously the fact he's been injured, suggests he can tell and inform them what has happened on the battlefield because he's clearly just come from the battlefield. So again, I will make some notes here. So we have this interrogative. And it does kind of suggest it's throwing us straight into this battlefield, this confusion. Because he's asking for information and we want to know as well. But we can tell from this that he's obviously been injured. We then have Malcolm, the king's son, answering his father and explaining that this is a sergeant, and you can see here the notes. So this was a higher rank than it is today. So we have this sergeant, so someone who was quite high up in the military, who, like a good and hardy soldier, fought against my captivity. So he is someone who, again, if you make use of the notes here, he fought against Malcolm, the king's son, being held captive, being caught by the enemy. Hail, brave friend, say to the king the knowledge of the broil, as thou dost leave it. And broil here, again, sort of suggesting kind of savagery of the fight, because broiling, it's something that we think of it being sort of chaotic and violent. So it's emphasizing the kind of violence of the battle. And it creates those connotations then to the violence. Now the captain has sort of a long response here to the question that he's been asked. So doubtful it stood, and here is where we now need to, as I mentioned before, think about picturing what Shakespeare is describing to us. As two spent swimmers that do cling together and choke their art. So again, like I said, if we picture this, he's describing two people swimming that are clinging together, and because they're clinging together, they're fighting to stay adrift, they actually end up drowning. So this is how the battle is. It's doubtful. It's not quite sure. It's not clear who is going to win, to the point where both armies are sort of fighting together and there's no real clear outcome, that they're sort of matching each other, really. The merciless MacDonald, worthy to be a rebel, for to that the multiplying villainies of nature. So we have this person that's being described here. This is the person who is he is a rebel, he is a traitor. The multiplying villainies of nature do swarm upon them from the western isles of Cairns and Gallowglasses is supplied. So he's being kind of, again, if you make note of the notes here, he's making use of reinforcements and foot soldiers and fighting men with battle axes from Ireland and the Hebrides, which is part of Scotland. The Hebrides, the Outer Hebrides, are islands just off Scotland's the main body of Scotland itself. And fortune on his damned quarrel smiling. So again, if you make notes here, make use of the notes at the side. So fortune on his damned quarrel smiling. We've got personification of fortune, this idea of being lucky, being personified. On his damned quarrel smiling, showed like a rebel's whore, but all's too weak for brave Macbeth. So This is our first mention of Macbeth, and it's really, really interesting that this is how he's described at the start of the play. It's very, very important, particularly this adjective here. Okay, they see him as courageous, they see him as a good soldier, heroic. So he's being painted in very positive light here at the beginning. Just going to make a note, heroic, courage. Okay, we've got this adjective, really good quote here to sort of remember and recall for the exam. Well, he deserves that name. So, they think very highly of him. They think he deserves being called brave. Disdaining fortune, so they can see that fortune is looking favourably on the enemy. But Macbeth is so brave that he's disdaining fortune. He doesn't care what fortune is smiling on. Him with brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution. So again, if you picture that, his sword smoked. So it's suggesting that he is so ferocious, he's fighting so savagely that it's almost as though his blade is on fire. With bloody execution, like Valor's minion. So Valor again meaning bravery. So he's like a little minion, a helper of bravery. So again, there's personification here of a concept, an idea. Carved out his passage. So again, thinking of the image that's creating, it's like he's carving his way, he's cutting his way through all of these men, these soldiers, till he faced the slave. Okay, so he's come face to face with this traitor, which never shook hands nor bade him farewell till he unseamed him from the nave to the chaps. So again, thinking very clearly about the imagery that's creating, and again you can make use of the notes at the side here. He unseamed him, so he ripped him open, obviously using his sword, from his navel to his jaws, so from his stomach to his jaws. So this is really, really important here again, okay? Again, we want to pick up this imagery, and this verb in particular. Obviously a very powerful soldier, but actually the violence, the context of the violence here is looked on favourably. He's seen as heroic for being this kind of violent at the start here. And it says here again about the violence, they unseamed him from the nave to the chaps. So Macbeth is clearly a man who is capable of being very violent. He's used to being on a battlefield. He is used to taking lives. He's used to taking them in very vicious, violent ways. But at this point, this is perceived, this is seen as good. They're happy about this because he's doing something that they believe in. And Duncan the king speaks highly of him for doing this. O valiant cousin, worthy gentleman. And there's a hint here that they are related. He refers to him as cousin. Valiant meaning brave. Worthy again suggesting that he's got value, that him being a soldier is valuable, that his attributes as a soldier, so his violence, his ability to kill and take lives, it's been seen here as something valuable, as good. And almost reinforces this idea of patriarchy at this point, because being a violent, vicious soldier on the battlefield is seen as good and positive. So again, this is a key quote. He's seen as valiant and worthy. So the captain then continues. As whence the sun gains his reflection, shipwrecking storms and direful thunders, so from the spring whence comfort seems to come, discomfort swells. So again, using the notes on the side here, that explains it for us. Just as stormy weather can come from the east, so further trouble arose from a source which should have brought help. So reinforcements have come, and they've come for the enemy of Scotland, for the people that Macbeth is fighting against. And Mark, King of Scotland, Mark No sooner justice had his valour armed, compelled these skipping kerns to trust their heels, but the Norwegian lord surveying vantage with furbished arms and new supplies of men began a fresh assault. So we see, okay, again using the notes here, it kind of helps us. So force these panic-stricken ruffians to run away. The Norwegian lord, so the King of Norway, also is part of this invading force. He sees an advantage here and he kind of reinforces the men. So we can see that Scotland is almost being attacked from multiple sort of ways. Okay, there's 3 ways that the enemy are being resupplied and new men being kind of dropped off to fight here. And then Duncan asks, were Macbeth and Banquo, were they dismayed? So were they downcast? Were they disheartened by this? Did they kind of lose this thirst for battle? And the captain here is almost like sort of humorous. Okay, yes, as sparrows, eagles, or the hare, the lion. If I soothsay, I must report they were. So he says that actually they are like cannons overcharged with double cracks. So in other words, you've got over here, it explains it, twice as much ammunition as usual. So instead of being disheartened, instead of being dismayed, instead what Banquo and Macbeth did was they became even more sort of bolstered with this idea of winning. They wanted to win even more, so they were even more violent. So they redoubled strokes upon the foe. So they were even more violent in their approach to the enemy. And again, this we can pick out as an important piece of imagery. Okay, because again, it's emphasizing that idea that they didn't become dismayed. They almost became more eager to participate in the fight and to win. Okay. Except they meant to bathe in reeking wounds. So again, a very violent image. Okay, it's almost as though they are energized by this battle, by this by the death. Okay, so gosh, make sure that you've spelled that correctly. So the energy of battle. So they're sort of spurred on to win. They want to win. And we have here a biblical reference. So this is part of the scene. So Golgotha is where Christ was meant to be crucified. So for Christians it has this it has negative connotations, because obviously this is where Christ was crucified, and therefore it's almost like they want to create something even worse. They want to create a worse image than Golgotha. I cannot tell, but I am faint, my gashes cry for help. So he needs to be seen by a doctor. So Duncan then replies. He says to this captain, your wounds show how honourable you fought, how well you fought. Go and see the surgeons. And he's taken away then. So we have then Ross and Angus again, who are thanes, are lords. And Duncan asks, who's coming? Who are these? And Malcolm then introduces them. So the worthy thane of Ross. So that's Lennox. What a haste looks through his eyes. So should he look that seems to speak things strange. So Ross, God save the king. Whence camest thou, worthy thane? So Duncan's asking Ross, where have you come from? So sorry, the thane of Ross is Ross himself. That's the person who Malcolm has introduced. Sorry, not Lennox. So Ross arrives and he's eager to speak to the king, and we can see that from the notes here on the side. So Ross has come from Fife, so an area of Scotland. Okay, and we learn later on that Fife is where Macduff is thane, so he's the Lord of Fife. So from Fife, great king, where the Norwegian banners flout the sky and fan our people cold. So he's giving him news then of these Norwegian invaders coming in and entering via Fife to Scotland. Norway himself with terrible numbers, assisted by that most disloyal traitor, the Thane of Cawdor. Now, this is really, really important. We have a Thane of Scotland, the Thane of Cawdor, has assisted and helped this invader of Norway. The Thane of Cawdor, the current Thane of Cawdor at the start of the play, is a traitor who allows Norway to enter and invade Scotland. Began a dismal conflict till the Bellona's bridegroom lacked in proof. Okay, so we've got the reference here. So Macbeth, looking like the husband of the Roman goddess of war, comes in. Okay, so it's referencing Macbeth here. So again, that's going to be important, because it's this idea of him being the husband of a goddess of war, the significance, the importance of him in that on that battlefield scene, that he is so worthy a soldier, he's such a good leader of the forces of Scotland in this battle, that he's almost like this bridegroom, the groom of a goddess of war. And Macbeth confronts this thing with self-comparisons, point against point, rebellious, arm against arm, curbing his lavish spirit, and to conclude, the victory fell on us. So we're told that this battle has been won. So Scotland, Duncan's army has won against these invading forces. And obviously Duncan replies with great happiness. Then Ross replies that now Sweno, the Norway's kings, craves compensation. So again, we can make notes, we can make use of the notes here to help us understand what's going on. So, they want to be able to kind of rectify what's happened, and compensation for, obviously, the damages that have been done to the armies here. Duncan then says, makes a really important point. No more that Thane of Cawdor shall deceive, so he'll no longer lie to our bosom interest, to him. Go pronounce his present death, so he sentences him to death. He wants this Thane of Cawdor, the original Thane of Cawdor, to be put to death for treachery, for treason. Go pronounce his present death, and with his former title greet Macbeth. Now that is really, really important, because it's ironic. There's irony here. Macbeth is being given the title of a traitor, and we know that in the rest of the play he becomes a traitor himself. He kills King Duncan. He is a traitor himself. He actually performs a worst act. He actually performs regicide. He kills a king. Ross says, I'll see it done. What he hath lost, noble Macbeth has won. So again, that idea of being noble. So it's this idea of having honour, of being just, of being a good person. So again, we've got this presentation of Macbeth at the beginning, the way he's spoken about. Before we even meet him, we have this impression provided to us by other characters. He's seen as this good leader. He's obviously forceful and violent, but it's good at this point because he's violent in the right context. He's violent during a battle. So that's a really, really important part of the play. We see him being introduced here as a good man. He fits with what is expected of men at this time. He's violent, but for the right reasons. He's violent in a very sort of, again, stereotypically acceptable way. So in battle and in defence of his country and in defence of his king. So he's seen as very noble at this point because of his violent tendencies. They are in and used and acted upon in the right way. We've got the description of him on the battlefield to kind of support this idea. We've got the positive descriptions of him from these men. The fact that he's described as brave, worthy. He's described at the end then as noble as well. So really good, useful quotes. You can actually revise those ones, learn those ones, and they're very easy ones to use in response to an essay question. But hopefully that helps. Any questions about this act and scene so far, just drop me a little message either in our Google Classrooms or via a little email.